I went to the bank to close an old savings account with less than $600 in it. At least, that was what I believed. The account had been opened when I was 16. I had not used it in years, and the bank had recently begun charging a maintenance fee. I expected the appointment to take 10 minutes. Instead, the banker stared at his computer screen, stopped typing, and slowly looked up at me. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "before we continue, I need to verify your identification again." I handed him my driver's license. He compared it to the information on his screen, then asked for my social security number, previous address, and mother's maiden name. After I answered, he stood. "I need to bring in our branch manager. Is something wrong?" He did not answer directly. A few minutes later, he returned with a woman in a navy suit. She closed the office door behind her. The banker turned the monitor slightly away from me and said, "You cannot close this account today." "Why not?" The branch manager sat across from me. "Because the balance is not $583. My first thought was that the bank had made a mistake. "How much is it?" The banker swallowed. "Your current balance is approximately $55 million. I laughed. I honestly thought it was a joke. Neither of them laughed with me. 3 hours later, my mother called and demanded to know why I had visited that bank. I had not told anyone where I was going. By the following morning, my older sister was standing outside my apartment, crying and asking me not to contact an attorney. That was when I understood the money was real. And someone in my family had known about it long before I did. My name is Evelyn Bennett. I was 37 years old when an account I had forgotten existed changed everything I believed about my family. I did not grow up wealthy. At least, I did not think I did. My mother, Patricia, raised my older sister, Nicole, and me in a modest house outside Columbus, Ohio. Our father, James Bennett, died when I was 17. He had worked as an electrical engineer for a small technology company called Hartwell Systems. He was not an executive. He did not drive an expensive car. He wore the same brown jacket for nearly 10 years and repaired everything in our house himself. Whenever I asked what he did at work, he said, "I help machines speak to each other." I assumed that meant he worked with wiring. After he died, my mother told us the company had been struggling and Dad had left very little behind. There was a small life insurance payment, but most of it went toward the mortgage, medical bills, and funeral expenses. Nicole was 21 then. She had already left college and was living with her boyfriend. I was finishing high school. Mom told me there was no money for university. I believed her. I enrolled at a community college, worked evenings at a pharmacy, and later completed a degree in bookkeeping while working full-time. I never blamed my father. He had been sick for nearly a year. I assumed whatever savings he had built disappeared during his treatment. My mother often reminded me how difficult those years had been. "I kept this family alive," she would say. And in many ways, she had. She paid bills. She kept the house. She worked in a dental office and took weekend shifts at a grocery store. But she also made sure Nicole, and I understood that every sacrifice created a debt we could never fully repay. Nicole handled that pressure differently than I did. She stayed close to Mom. She called every day, asked for advice, and included her in every decision. I became independent. Or, more accurately, I learned that needing less created fewer opportunities for disappointment. By 37, I had built a stable life. I worked as a finance manager for a regional construction company. I rented a small apartment, drove a reliable car, and kept 6 months of expenses in savings. My life was not exciting, but it belonged to me. Nicole had married a real estate agent named Brandon. They lived in a large house they could barely afford and presented every financial crisis as a temporary inconvenience. Over the years, I lent them money twice. The first time was for an emergency roof repair. The second time was after Brandon's business slowed down. Neither loan was repaid. Whenever I mentioned it, Mom said, "They have children, Evelyn. You have flexibility." Flexibility was another family word. It meant my needs could be moved because someone else's could not. The old bank account had been opened by my father shortly before my 16th birthday. He took me to a branch of Midland Community Bank and deposited $500. He told me it was mine, but I should leave it alone unless I truly needed it. "It's not much," he said, "but small things can become important if you give them time." I added money from my first summer job. When Dad became ill, the account stopped mattering. After his death, I withdrew most of what I had saved to pay for textbooks and a used laptop. I thought the remaining balance was less than $200. Years passed. Midland Community Bank merged with a larger institution. Then that bank merged again. The account followed me through changes of name and ownership, but I rarely opened the statements. Eventually, I forgot about it. Then I received a notice saying the account would begin charging a monthly fee unless I maintained a higher balance. I decided to close it. The banker who met me was named Thomas. At first, the appointment was ordinary. He asked whether I wanted the remaining funds in cash or transferred to another account. I chose a transfer. Then he entered the old account number. His expression changed. He searched again. He checked my identification. Then he brought in the branch manager. The manager's name was Angela Price. After telling me the balance was approximately $55 million, she explained that the account was restricted. It was not a simple savings account anymore. At some point, it had become connected to a custodial investment account containing shares, dividends, and the proceeds of multiple corporate transactions. "That is impossible," I said. Angela turned a document toward me. The original account holder was listed as James Bennett, custodian for Evelyn Bennett. My father. The beneficiary information listed my full name and date of birth. The account had been opened under a law that allowed adults to hold assets for minors until a specified age. "What assets?" I asked. "We cannot fully review the history at the branch level," she said. "The account contains cash and securities, but some positions were automatically converted during mergers and acquisitions." "I don't understand." Thomas spoke carefully. "It appears your father transferred shares into the account." "What shares?" "Hartwell Systems, the company where he had worked." I almost laughed again. Hartwell was a small engineering company. It barely survived. Angela looked at the screen. "Hartwell Systems was acquired 18 years ago. The acquiring company was later purchased by a public corporation. Your holdings appear to have converted several times." I stared at her. Why didn't I know? That is something our legal and trust department will need to investigate. Could someone else access the account? Angela hesitated. There have been inquiries and attempted instructions over the years. From whom? We cannot disclose that until identity and authority records are reviewed. I'm the beneficiary. Yes, but the original custodial arrangement should have transferred control to you years ago. The fact that it remained restricted is unusual. She asked me not to contact anyone until the bank completed an initial fraud and ownership review. I signed several documents confirming that I had not previously accessed or managed the investment account. Before leaving, I asked one more question. Is the $55 million actually mine? Angela answered carefully. The records currently identify you as the beneficial owner, but the bank needs to verify the transaction history before releasing anything. I walked out of the branch feeling less wealthy than I had felt when I entered. My hands were shaking. $55 million did not feel like money. It felt like evidence. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes. Then my mother called. "Where are you?" she asked. The question was too direct. "At work." It was the first lie I had told her in years. "You're not at work." My skin went cold. "How would you know?" She paused. "Nicole said she tried to call your office." "Why would she do that?" "We need to talk." "About what?" Another pause. "Did you go to Midland Bank today?" I looked back at the building. "How do you know that?" My mother exhaled. "Come to my house." "No, tell me how you knew." "This is not a phone conversation." "Then we're not having it." I ended the call. She called again immediately. I did not answer. By the time I reached home, I had 11 missed calls. 6 from Mom. 3 from Nicole. 2 from Brandon. None of them left a clear message. That evening, I contacted an attorney. His name was Marcus Hale, and he specialized in trusts, estates, and financial disputes. A colleague had used him during a complicated inheritance case. I told him only the basic facts. He asked me not to sign anything my family provided and not to discuss the amount with them. "Do you know whether your father had ownership in Hartwell Systems?" he asked. "No." "Do you have access to his old papers?" My mother kept everything. Then assume she may know more than she is saying. The following morning, Nicole appeared outside my apartment. She was crying before I opened the door. "Please don't call the police," she said. I had not yet accused anyone of a crime. Her words confirmed more than she realized. "What did you do?" "Nothing." "Then why are you asking me not to call the police?" She entered without waiting for an invitation. Her face was pale and swollen. "Mom handled everything," she said. "Everything meaning what?" "The account." I felt my stomach tighten. "You knew about it?" "Not at first." "When did you find out?" She looked away. "About 7 years ago." 7 years. For 7 years, my sister had known there was an account in my name. I had lent her money during that time. I had worked overtime. I had delayed medical treatment because my insurance deductible was too high. She had known. "How much did you think was in it?" "Not 55 million. "How much?" "Maybe 4 or 5. $4 or $5 million. She said it as though the difference made her innocence obvious. "Start at the beginning," I said. Nicole sat on my couch. After Dad died, Mom found documents showing that he had received founder shares in Hartwell Systems. Dad had joined the company during its earliest years. Instead of a larger salary, he accepted a small ownership stake. When Hartwell began attracting interest from larger companies, Dad transferred most of those shares into custodial accounts for Nicole and me. Nicole's account contained fewer shares because she was already an adult and had received other assets directly. My account held the larger portion. "Why didn't I receive control when I turned 21? I asked. Nicole wiped her face. "Mom submitted documents saying you were financially incapable." I stared at her. "Incapable how?" "She said you had severe emotional problems after Dad died." "I worked and attended college." "I know." "She told a bank I was incompetent." "Not legally incompetent. She said you were vulnerable and asked them to maintain restrictions while the estate was disputed." "What dispute?" "There wasn't really one." My hands began to shake again. "Keep talking." "When Hartwell was acquired, the shares increased dramatically in value. My mother began receiving correspondence about the account. Instead of notifying me, she claimed she was still acting as custodian. The bank's records should have been corrected when I reached the transfer age, but multiple mergers and incomplete documentation allowed the restriction to continue. Mom could not withdraw the principal freely, but she had managed to redirect some dividends and authorize loans against related family assets. How much did she take? I don't know. You said you knew about this for 7 years. I knew there was money. I didn't know every detail. Did any of it go to you? Nicole began crying harder. That was the answer. How much? Mom helped with our house. How much? 300,000. I felt the room become strangely quiet. The down payment. And some debts. Did you know it came from my account? She said it came from Dad's investments. In my name. She said Dad intended the money for the family. Then why hide it from me? Nicole covered her face. Because she said you would cut everyone off. I stood. I had less than $10,000 in savings when you asked me for the roof loan. I know. You took $15,000 from me after receiving $300,000 connected to my account. I plan to pay you back. With what? She had no answer. I told her to leave. At the door, she turned around. Mom is terrified. She should be. She could go to prison. That depends on what she did. You can tell the bank it was a family arrangement. I'm not lying. You don't understand what this will do to everyone. There it was. The same pressure in a new form. My loss had been acceptable because it helped everyone. The truth was dangerous because it might inconvenience them. I understand exactly what it will do, I said. For the first time, it will make the consequences belong to the people who made the decisions. After Nicole left, I called Marcus. The bank's legal department had already contacted him. Over the next several weeks, we reconstructed the account history. My father's ownership in Hartwell Systems had been larger than anyone in our family admitted. He was not a majority owner, but he had been one of the first engineers and held a meaningful block of shares. Before his final illness became severe, he divided those shares between Nicole and me. Nicole received direct ownership of her portion because she was already an adult. She sold most of it during the first acquisition. My mother persuaded her to use the money for college debts, living expenses, and family costs. My shares remained invested. Because no one completed the transfer properly, they continued growing through acquisitions, stock conversions, dividends, and reinvestment. The $55 million was not a surprise deposit. It was the result of nearly 2 decades of ownership growth. The bank had made serious errors. My mother had exploited those errors. She submitted letters claiming I had authorized her to receive account information. My signature appeared on 2 documents. I had not signed either one. She used dividend payments to cover family expenses and support Nicole. She also used statements from my account to help secure a business loan for Brandon. The principal investment remained mostly intact because the bank restricted large withdrawals. That restriction was the only reason anything remained. Marcus asked whether I wanted to report the forged documents immediately. I did not answer right away. Part of me still wanted my mother to explain herself before strangers turned her actions into legal language. I agreed to meet her at Marcus's office. She arrived carrying a thick folder. Nicole came with her. Brandon waited in the hallway. Mom looked smaller than I remembered. For several minutes, no one spoke. Then she said, "Your father never meant that money to belong only to you." Did he tell you that? We were married. That wasn't my question. She placed the folder on the table. Inside were copies of Dad's old letters, account statements, and legal documents. One letter was addressed to my mother. Patricia, the shares for the girls must remain separate. Nicole is old enough to make her own choices. Evelyn's portion should be protected until she reaches the transfer age. Do not use it for household expenses. I want both daughters to have security beyond what we can provide now. I read the paragraph twice. My mother watched me. He wrote that while he was sick, she said. It is very clear. He did not understand what it would become. Neither did you. I understood the family needed help. You forged my signature. Her eyes filled with tears. I signed for you. That is called forging my signature. I was your mother. I was 30 years old on one of those documents. You were not thinking about the future. I was working 2 jobs and paying my own bills. You never wanted children. You didn't need a large house. Nicole had a family. I looked at my sister. She stared at the table. So because I didn't have children, my inheritance became hers. That is not what I said. It is exactly what you said. Mom leaned toward me. Nicole needed support. Brandon's business was struggling. Your nephews needed stability. And what did I need? You were always fine. The answer hurt more than the money. I had been fine because I had no other choice. My mother had turned survival into proof that I deserved less. Marcus asked her to explain the altered authorization documents. She admitted signing my name to one of them. She claimed the second had been prepared by a former financial advisor. The bank's investigation later found that advisor had accepted her representations without contacting me. He was no longer employed by the institution. Why did you never tell me the account existed? I asked. Mom began crying. At first I planned to. When? After you finished college. I finished college 15 years ago. Then Hartwell was sold, and everything became complicated. So you waited. I was afraid you would take the money and leave. I stared at her. I did leave, I just left poor. Nicole covered her mouth. Even Marcus looked down. My mother whispered, I did what I thought was necessary. No, you did what was easiest to justify. The legal process took nearly a year. The bank accepted responsibility for failing to transfer control and for honoring defective authorization documents. It restored improperly diverted funds, paid interest, and covered a portion of the legal costs through a confidential settlement. The account itself was transferred into a properly managed trust under my control. After taxes, fees, corrections, and market changes, the amount was slightly lower than the number I first heard at the branch. It was still more money than I could emotionally understand. My mother faced civil claims connected to the unauthorized transactions and forged authorization. The matter was also referred for legal review. There was no dramatic scene where she was handcuffed in a bank lobby. There were interviews, attorneys, repayment agreements, and consequences that unfolded quietly. She sold the family house. Part of the proceeds repaid funds connected to the account. Nicole and Brandon refinanced their home and signed a long-term repayment agreement. I did not demand that they lose everything, but I refused to pretend the money had been a gift. Nicole returned the $15,000 I had lent her. The transfer arrived without a message. A week later, she asked to meet. We sat in a coffee shop where no one knew us. She looked exhausted. I told myself Mom was managing Dad's money, she said. You knew it was in my name. I knew enough to ask questions. But you didn't. No. Why? Because the answers benefited me. It was the most honest thing she had said. I did not forgive her immediately, but I respected the truth. Over time, we began speaking again. Slowly, carefully, without pretending that sisterhood erased financial betrayal. My relationship with my mother became more distant. For months, she sent letters explaining why she had done what she did. Every letter mentioned Nicole's children, Brandon's failures, the mortgage, Dad's illness, or the pressure she felt after his death. None of them began with what she had taken from me. Then, almost a year later, I received a short note. It said, I called you strong whenever I wanted permission to give you less. Your father tried to protect you from that. I convinced myself I knew better. I kept the note, not because it repaired everything, Because it was the first time she named the pattern. The money changed my life, but not in the way my family expected. I did not buy a mansion. I did not quit my job the next morning. I hired an independent financial team. I paid off my apartment lease and purchased a modest home. I created scholarships for students who had lost a parent and were working through college. I invested in the construction company where I had spent years working, but only after an independent review. I also funded a small engineering scholarship in my father's name. The application asked students to describe something they had built, repaired, or improved with limited resources. That felt more like him than placing his name on a building. For the first time, I learned more about Dad's work. Former Hartwell employees told me he had helped design one of the company's earliest communication systems. They remembered him as quiet, patient, and stubborn about safety. One retired engineer gave me a photograph of my father standing beside a prototype. On the back, Dad had written, "Small systems become powerful when every connection is protected." I thought about the account he opened for me. He had not known the exact value it would reach. He had simply created a protected connection between his work and my future. My mother broke that protection because she believed my independence meant I would never notice what was missing. The day I entered the bank, I thought I was closing an account containing a few $100s. Instead, I discovered $55 million and nearly 20 years of family secrets. But the money was not the most shocking part. The most shocking part was understanding how easily people can call something family property when it belongs to the family member they expect to remain silent. My mother believed I did not need the money because I had survived without it. My sister believed accepting it was harmless because she had children and I did not. The bank believed the person speaking for me must have authority because she was my mother. Everyone had a reason. None of those reasons gave them ownership. My father once told me that small things could become important if I gave them time. He was speaking about money, but he could have been speaking about boundaries. A signature, a question, a record, a decision not to let someone else explain your life for you. I went to the bank to close an old account. The banker went pale when he saw the balance. But the real account being closed that day was not financial. It was the account my family had kept for years, where every sacrifice I made became something they believed I still owed them. And for the first time, the balance belonged entirely to me.